On this episode of Still Loading, you bring the game and Carmine will bring the sound. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, I have a wonderful interview prepared for you. Today, I am joined by the wonderful Carmine from Game and Sound, the YouTube channel Game and Sound, and this interview has been a long time coming. We have been planning this for over 8 months, just about, or maybe 7 months at the very least, and it's just been nonstop chaos on both our ends, but we finally worked out a schedule. We're here. And joining me today to talk about all things games and all things sounds is Carmine. Carmine, how are you doing today?
Hey, everyone. Hey, thanks for having me. This is actually my first podcast.
Is it?
Ever, yes. I've done interviews and stuff like that, but the first podcast ever. So, yeah.
I wanted to have you on because I've actually enjoyed your music on the Game and Sound YouTube channel for a while. In fact, I reached out to you to ask for permission to use your music on the Secret of Monkey Island, your cover of Secret of Monkey Island.
Oh, right, yeah.
And
I forgot that.
I mean, I think it was a year prior to when I asked you to come on the show. But I saw on Twitter that you said, you tweeted out something like, I got an email from a podcast, and it was like something not related to coming onto a podcast.
Yeah, it was like I don't know if it was a scam or something like that, but yeah, it was like a bot or something.
And you mentioned how you would love to come on a podcast and no one has asked you. I'm like, I can fix that. So here we are.
Yeah,
finally.
You surely did.
I mean, it took me 7 months, but we finally got it. So, yeah, man, thank you so much for joining me. First off, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty all right. Chilling out. I got my coffee here. I worked on some music. It's been a chill kind of day. It's pretty cold outside, so it's one of those nice days where you're all cozy inside working on your music, and took it to a friend today, so it's very good.
What you said it's cold. What temperatures are you? Feel free to do it in Celsius. I have a calculator for us dumb Americans to to switch it over.
It's been, I think, 5
degrees
my God. Celsius.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's in the low 40s for us. By the way, listeners, I'm not that good at math. I brought it up on Google. I just did that real quick.
If you didn't say that, no one would be able to tell it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so smart, listeners. Look at me doing math. You can't tell
the Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. Like I said, can't thank you enough for coming on to the show. My first question for you to kind of start off our conversation here is, that we are a gaming podcast, and while I do want to talk about your YouTube channel, your influence for the YouTube channel clearly is video games. It's called Game and Sound. It's got an awesome version of the Game & Watch logo. I really like that.
Yep.
So my first question for you, what are some of your earliest gaming memories, and how did you kind of get into video games in general?
Oh man, it's a big question. So I want to say my very, very first game was the first Sonic the Hedgehog.
On the Mega Drive, okay.
Yes, because my dad actually had a Mega Drive or Genesis for American people, and he just bought it for himself, but it happened to be in the house and was my first actual game, and it was a bunch of Mega Drive games. Some were more weird, and some others were are more nerd today, like Mickey Mouse. Was
Castle-volution?
Castle-volution, yes. And then the next console was the SNES, and Mario World and all of that. That got me into Nintendo. And this is actually a very curious thing. So I had this game that's called Pluck for the SNES, which isn't very known of.
Like PLOK?
Yes.
Okay.
And it isn't that much to write home about in terms of, platformer, but it was a fine game. It wasn't anything crazy. It had a nice style, but the big thing about this game was the music. I really liked the music. And then years and years later, I found out that, when I actually started the channel and I started, getting interested into composers, game composers and stuff like that, I found out that the soundtrack was made by Tim and Jeff Fallin, I think, two
Tim
brothers.
Jeff Fallin, yep.
Yes, they are very, very well known among fans of game music, and the soundtrack is basically like a prog rock album, like a 70s prog rock album, and it's super weird because growing up and learning guitar when I was like 15 or something, I got into prog rock like for some reason, and then I found out that when I was just a little Carmine Jr., I really liked prog rock in a way because I liked the music from Pluck.
Oh, so maybe it kind of informed your opinion.
It might have, I don't know, but it's a weird coincidence, but it has to be something like that. By the way, it's like a fire soundtrack. You should go listen to it.
I think I saw something literally on Twitter. Maybe you retweeted it on your account. Someone was saying probably how great the Pluck soundtrack was. I'm like, I've never even listened to it. What I know Tim and Jeff Fallin from the most is their Silver Surfer soundtrack on the original Nintendo, which is just balls to the wall insane. Like the stuff they're able to pull off on that limited sound chip in that game is insane.
It's crazy. It's like even on the SNES, if you listen to Pluck, or I don't know if they did anything else on the SNES specifically, but the way it works in a very broad manner. I'm no expert, but I know SNES works on like with samples instead of a synthesis engine like the Genesis, like the Mega Drive, and the way they like made this soundtrack sound that rich is they actually layered samples one on top of each other, and then since the SNES has like it has limited tracks for samples, like maybe 8, I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
Like the way they did it is like, we want to have these 3 sounds here, but we don't have space left. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna like mix them together in one single sample, and then put it in one track. Like
I see.
It's very fun and curious because it's the way like old 8 tracks worked, like in the 70s. The way they recorded music. So it's very old school style. Super super cool.
That's super interesting. Now, you mentioned a handful of things, Sonic and then like Mario and Super Nintendo. Not even out of those, maybe it's even something you didn't mention. What would you say is some of your most formative ones? Meaning for myself, as an example, I remember playing, Sonic the Hedgehog at my neighbor's house. And even though I can't say I got to play it a lot, it was super formative for me because it's something that I still hold and a really fond memory. And things that kind of formed my opinions on games later on. I would also say like first time I played like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, like really formed the basis of kind of what my gaming tastes are for years to come. Yeah.
My case, I want to say Sonic was a little bit of a one-off because I never got to play 2 and 3. I played them like very, very late. Like it's something I did willingly later, but once I got into Nintendo platforms, then it's always been Nintendo since the SNES. I got the N64, I got the GameCube, I got the Wii, etc., etc. But I want to say Mario World is still one of my favorite like platformers like ever.
Yes.
I have trouble thinking of better 2D ones. I want to say Donkey Kong.
Few and far between. The only other one I can
f-
think of would be Super Mario World. Well, 2, Yoshi's Island.
Yoshi's Island, yes. Even like Donkey Kong Country, I really love those games, but I think they're a little bit more jank than Mario World. Mario World is like it's super tight even today.
Yep.
But yeah, I like Mario 64 was a good one, a big one. And I think it holds up today, even though worse than Mario World, just because camera issues. If you think that it was Nintendo's first attempt at 3D, that it's crazy though. Like
the
Mario
fact that
64, I think
it controls a lot better than it has any right to, considering they were trying to figure stuff out on the fly. Like there wasn't something to reference back to. They had to make it all on their first time. It's wild.
Yeah. I don't want to, I don't want to say, common things, but I mean, cannot.
You're allowed to say common things too. I think like people way too often get hung up. Like I gotta say something super obscure and edgy to, show how credible my gamer card is or something like that. Nah, man. If your favorite Mario is Super Mario World, like there's a reason why Mario is still popular. Like no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, there's a reason why Mario is still popular. It like if you want an obscure game, I can tell you Kabuki Quantum Fighter. I talk about it all the goddamn time because no one ever mentions Kabuki Quantum Fighter. But that doesn't make me more of a gamer because of it. It just means that I have less of a life because I've heard of Kabuki Quantum Fighter. But
I think the weirdest game I know is probably prog. And but this is like a weird one, and I kind of liked it, but the music again is very, it's very good. That it's kind of become like a meme with people I know, because I think it's a Looney Tunes game.
Okay,
let me look it up because I know it in Italian, but I don't know.
Is it Sheepdog and Wolf?
Yes.
Wait, are you serious?
Yes, I love it. Oh my god,
dude!
Oh my god!
In North America, it's called Sheep Raider. It's the one you play as Sam Sheepdog, or sorry, Ralph Wolf having to steal the sheep from Sam Sheepdog. Dude, you're blowing my god! No one knows about that game at all.
Oh my god!
That was a shot in the dark. I'm like, that's an obscure game that like I love. I actually beat it for the first time last year on Twitch, and I loved it. Oh my god!
The music is crazy. It's crazy. Like it goes from like funk and rock music to
there's like a lot of fusion
drum
stuff,
and bass fusion. It's it's all over the place in a good way. Like and it again, it has no right to be that good. It's like Looney Tunes licensed game, and
my mind is just blown. Like, no, you're the first person I've ever spoken to that legitimately has known about that game. I think it was more popular over in Europe, so maybe that's why. But I don't know.
Maybe
I don't know.
I think I know it from like a demo disc. Not even I don't have the full game. I just had that demo disc. But
I would actually show you my copy if I wasn't like, you can kind of see it on the video screens, which I know listeners can't. Like a lot of my shelving is empty because I've been in the process of tearing down my game room for other shenanigans going on. But I do own a copy. It's just stored somewhere else right now. But that's I'm my mind.
I'm kind of blown away as well because I'm not sure if you're the first person I'm speaking to that knows it, but if you're not the first, you're like the second. Like
No one knows about that game, and
no one knows it.
It's a really underrated puzzle platformer. I really enjoyed that game when I played it. I really wish more people heard about it or played it, but I do actually plan on doing an episode on it at some point. I just don't just don't have the time for it. But okay. So in speaking of formative games and gaming memories and whatnot, which games kind of informed your musical tastes? Like you referenced already how about Sheepdog and Wolf a little bit with the music and all the different genres that it like incorporated into the game. But is that one of them, or do you have like a list of games that like really influenced your taste, or just some of your favorite soundtracks in general?
Okay, so my taste in music, like in general, has a lot of culprits. It's not just games. I know people who base their listening a lot on just games and game soundtracks, and there's no
that's a little limiting. No offense to game soundtracks.
But, there's no problem with that. But a lot of times those soundtracks do reference or take inspiration from other things. So I would like to know these other things, right? So it's in terms of games, I would say for the electronic side, I want to say one of the first and one of those that are still there in my head all the time is Metroid Prime. I really like the feel of that soundtrack. It's one of my favorite games like ever. But other than that, the soundtrack is very electronic heavy and can be like borderline ravey sometimes. But most of the time is super atmospheric and has I think gorgeous sound design. And to me it conveys perfectly what the game is supposed to, make you feel like. So
instead of like a memorable melody, it's more of an atmosphere that it builds.
Yeah, and great sounds. Like I remember like specific kicks, specific snares in the soundtrack. Like,
now, sorry, real quick, I realized we've been going for almost 20 minutes now, and we haven't even talked about like why we're focusing so much on music. We never mentioned what game and sound actually is. So listeners, for my listeners, real quick, tell them about your YouTube channel, and then we'll continue on with our conversation about musical influences. So tell my listeners about your channel.
Yeah, so I just make cover music from video games, and the idea was just it's kind of a stereotypical thing, but back like almost 10 years ago now, I've been doing this, and I just made an F-Zero cover for fun. Like I think it was Big Blue, and friends and mostly friends like told me like you should put it somewhere so like we can listen to it whenever you're not around to send us the files. And some of those friends just told me like straight up, you should open a channel, maybe people will start liking it and you can do more covers. And that's basically the reason why I started the channel. And the way I chose the name was just something that I thought about it, because I wanted it to be not something that I would change like after a year if it went well or moderately well. So I think Game and Sound is a good name because it's like Game and Sound, like the actual Game and Watch, the actual line of video games was just a series of different games, different things, but they were under the same moniker. So I think I thought Game and Sound would be like a good name, because I would do a lot of different covers and things and put it under the same name. So that's the general idea for it. And I mainly play guitar. I actually I would say I just play guitar. I piano, but it's not. It's just for composition rather than performing. And my very first covers were just guitar-based. I love guitar-based. While now, I'm all over the place because, in the meanwhile, I studied composition and stuff. So I'm very well versed now with many instruments and, sounds.
Yeah.
So that's a good name.
Well versed with lots of different games and lots of different sounds, so it's fitting. But yeah, let's move on back now. Now that my listeners have an idea of what your channel is, let's continue to talk about your musical influences. So you already mentioned Metroid Prime. You also mentioned prog rock is a musical influence. What are some of your favorite prog rock bands?
Oh man. So prog rock, I would say, if I had to choose like one genre, one favorite genre, it would be prog rock. I don't like choosing favorites. It's never just one for me.
I mean, you can have a favorite, but you can still enjoy others. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always difficult for me to just pinpoint like one thing. But like my favorite bands would be Gentle Giant first, I would say.
Okay.
Which isn't, and it's not a band that's part of the big prog rock legends. They're not that well known as Genesis or Yes or Pink Floyd. All bands I love, but Gentle Giant just had something about them that you couldn't find anywhere, because they were all, I think every one of them was a multi-instrumentalist. And
okay.
they played a lot of different stuff. Like they had a Baroque influence to their music, so it was all over the place again in a good way. But I really cannot find another prog band like them. Like the quality of the recordings was like incredible for the time. You can just listen to them and someone from the same years, and you notice that their recordings were much cleaner.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they were super and into everything music. Actually, that it was like tiny details. I won't even go into, because like it gets too technical. I don't think it would be useful now.
I mean, maybe we'll do a prog rock technical episode and dive into the nitty gritty. But until then,
then, But I just love everything about them, and they lasted like 10 years. Like in the 80s, they were no more. So they didn't even, they were too much even for the 70s. Like, and that's saying a lot. But yeah, I love those guys, and Kansas too. I already mentioned Yes, Genesis, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yep.
All the big names.
Are there any?
And Frank Zappa, of course.
Are there any like Italian artists? Just because we don't as pop culture here in North America, in the U.S. specifically, we don't really hear a lot from outside of the U.S. because we're too, I don't know if we're too self-absorbed or whatnot, but is there any like Italian artists, whether it's prog rock or otherwise, that you like really enjoy? Like we should shout it out, because maybe there's some new ones my listeners can find.
Like with prog rock, there's actually a little group of it kind of got its own like style, because it's, if you search around, you're gonna if you look for Italian prog rock, it's kind of its own little substyle, subgenre. And like I really like Italian prog bands like Banco del Mutuo Soccorso. It's difficult to actually spell it.
You know
for
what?
you.
If after we're done recording, type it up for me. I'll include it in the show notes, because they're like, I wouldn't be able to feign a guess at it.
Yeah. Then there's PFM. They're the most well known, so it's the biggest prog band from Italy.
Okay.
And then some smaller bands, but I'll give you like a good list maybe later, so you can link
I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, are there any other musical influences that have like affected your like how you compose or how you arrange your covers of the game songs? Like you mentioned prog rock, but are there any other genres or artists even? Like we were talking off mic about how you don't like how you feel like genres pigeonhole, or there's a lot of gatekeeping. Like you can't do this because you're part of this genre or whatever.
Yeah.
So let's not do that. Let's not gatekeep. Like outside of whether it's prog rock or otherwise, what other artists or musicians have kind of influenced, or other game music, even the composers for game music, which ones out there have influenced your personal style?
And that's a lot of them.
How about this? List like 5. Doesn't have to be top 5, because I understand that involves ranking. That's a lot of like that's a lot of math that you have to do on the fly when I didn't give you any prep beforehand. So just the 5 off the top of your head.
All right. So I want to say Earth, Wind, Fire for funk.
Yo, okay.
I want to say. I want to say John Scofield for jazz.
Okay.
Or for jazz guitar specifically. Is one of my favorite guitarists with Pat Metheny. I want to say Frank Zappa for general 70s and weird, experimental rock. What else do I have? I like an Italian artist that you probably know is Giorgio Moroder.
Yes, because he like Daft Punk really made him a lot more prominent in U.S. Obviously, he was bigger way before then, but like because once again, U.S. we're a little behind on a lot of the pop culture from Europe.
He's kind of the father of Italo disco or stuff like that, and that's I like. If you remember the Daft Punk song, it starts with a click, like a metronome click. And that is the basis on which Giorgio actually made his style, because like he did like the kick drum on every beat. It's your usual kick drum on every beat for disco, for electronic disco. He made it with a metronome going into an amplifier, I think, or something like that. Oh. So that's a metronome. So that's not an actual kick drum. It's like a metronome going into something, some effect chain or whatever.
That's really cool.
But for more experimental things, I like Brian Eno, like ambient stuff like that. There's a lot of things. I'm actually starting to listen to some hip hop. And I had this weird realization, like last year. That I never actually got interested in hip hop or anything like that, just because like when I grew up and when I was like, I'd never been like a big metalhead, but when you start playing guitar, you're gonna get into metal rock bands or metal bands, and you're gonna get into this stupid, like those stupid arguments about what's real music, good music, and hip hop is never good music for teenagers who play an instrument, because hip hop is has no instruments and it's all like electronic and sample based, and it's
and that's not always the case, but
bullshit things. But like I had this realization, like, why shouldn't I like hip hop? It's like, it's funk basically. It's just funk samples and guys who can do very cool vocal things like rhymes and rhythm. It's like there's no reason why I should like it, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean it's always good to broaden your horizons. Man, I have to get you hooked up with my buddy Rick over at Pixel Project Radio, because you and him, I think, could just talk. Like Rick is also went to school for music, and a lot of his podcast, like he does full on music episodes periodically. He's also very big into jazz. That's one of his personal favorite genres, as it were. I really think you and him would hit it off really well. He's much more knowledgeable about music than I am. Like, so if you list like jazz guitarists or musicians or drummers, horn players, whatever, flutists, any of that stuff, he will be the guy who will probably know it at least.
Great.
So
I'll
have to get you two hooked up with each other. So
definitely, yeah.
For your YouTube channel now,
yes.
So we talked about how, like where your influences come from, but now I want to know, when you're applying it to the YouTube channel, there's a couple questions I have. Like, one, how do you approach coming up with your arrangements? So do you pick a song first, or maybe you pick like, I really want to do a cover in this style, and then maybe find a song that fits it? Or is it more personal? Do you find something that you're going through a personal journey of picking out some of your favorite tracks?
It's a little bit of everything. Like, it's not always the same. It's not always the same reason. One technical thing that I have to follow no matter what is licensing. Like, I have to find something that can be licensed to be published on Spotify and stuff like that. Like, YouTube doesn't have such. It's more like a gray area. YouTube is like, you can upload whatever, but then, God knows what will happen to your stuff if if just the algorithm picks it up and all the copyright things. But with covers on Spotify and all those streaming services, which is where I have actual more numbers, there's actually a distributor who licenses your covers, and so everything is legal. The actual copyright holders get their share. You can have it up. As long as it's been released as a soundtrack, as an actual physical release or a digital one.
Okay.
So not especially with older games, sometimes you will not find an actual release for a track. So I think I wanted to make an F-Zero track some months ago, and it wasn't licensable at all. So I had to give it up. Like that's the issue with this. But speaking more artistic terms, it's like I mainly choose from my personal taste or mood I'm in that particular moment. And sometimes it's very natural. Like I happen to listen to one track and like I already imagined how or how I would make a cover of it. So those are the easier times, It's when you already have it in your head, and then you just have to do it. Some other times is I pick it just because it's a little bit out of my comfort zone, and then let's see what happens. But it's always like I have to like it first.
Yeah,
and the prompts can be basically any. It's like with a Pokemon, I mentioned this one. I have a Pokemon cover, like it's Route 209, I think, which is, I think, a very nice melody and everything. But if you go to listen to it, it has like a fast part at the end of the track, then it loops back. And it bothered me because it was too short. So I was listening to it, and I was like, this part is cool. Like, let's see where it goes. And then it goes nowhere. And the loop starts back, and that irks me. So I made the cover just because I didn't like how they did it.
And so did you?
Or I liked it a lot, but I didn't like how they ended it.
I gotcha. Did you then kind of complete that section at the end? Like you did your own interpretation of where it would have gone?
Yeah, I actually ended up like adding a good minute and a half of just my stuff, not even like covers, like composition at the points, not even arrangement anymore. But yeah,
that's super interesting. What's some of the most challenging aspects of arranging your covers? Like, is it the song? Or is it like the instrumentation, like the instruments that you choose? Is it trying to figure out maybe like what, like how to fit, because you use, like you said, guitar is like your primary instrument. Is it hard to find a way to use guitar in every song, or is it like what are some of the challenges you face when you're arranging these tracks?
All right. So it depends on every track, of course. But like with older music, with older like chip tune and stuff like that, the problem often is it's very short. Like the loop is very short.
Yep.
It's like 20 seconds or 30 or 1 minute at best. So I have to actually come up with new things. Like it's gonna be a compositional thing, and the more I did, I went heavier on the original parts. Back then, when I started, I just covered the main loop, like the main track, and then maybe I looped a couple times. I didn't put too much, thought into it. But now I kind of think about them like an actual finished track. So it has to have its flow. It has to hit some points, there has to be a climax that has to be hit at some point, and there has to be a like satisfying ending to it. So I think a lot more about the arrangement and the overall flow of the song. So it can be hard to make new material that it sounds, I don't want to say I want to just use good, but it sounds like it belongs to the track, right?
Yeah, it's in the same style as the track, the same kind of like overall vibe and feel of it. I getcha.
Yes. Some of the time I just, let myself, let my ear guide me. And some of the most fun ones I did were just because I felt like, it was pretty cool like that. And I just went with it, I was listening just yesterday to another podcast where the host was talking about like how they thought creative people approach their craft, and they thought that every musician, every artist had already figured everything out before even putting a note up or drawing a line. But it's never like that. It's like you have the gist of it at the start, and then you just just improvise.
And error. Yeah. I think that's a super, I know it's like kind of tangential to what our conversation's about, but I think that's something that not a lot of people know. I'm not putting myself necessarily as a creative. I guess I technically am because I do the podcast, but I don't know. Yeah. I always feel weird calling myself that because what I do is converse. It's not really like I'm putting out, like music or art or like paintings or drawings or like making film or video or stuff like that. But I do think that there is a creative element, at least even for my own stuff, of just picking episode topics, ideas to like engage with people, stuff like that. And I think that some people forget that a lot of it's just trial and error. Like you're just guessing 90% of the time. Like you do something and then it doesn't work, and you're like, all right, then I'll learn for next time. Like I've released episodes, I won't name any of them, but I've released episodes where I tried something different in either how I approach an interview, or maybe how I approach conversing about a game, or maybe even just like it was a weird idea for an episode that I've never tried before, and I'll go back and listen to it now and I'll be like, oh man, I could have done that better. But like at the time, you're just trying to, like, you won't know until you do it.
Yeah, you don't know at all. Like I totally share the sentiment with. I have a lot of old covers that I don't even like anymore, but they were part of the process. Like they were part of the channel and everything, and that's for sure. But they were part of my learning. So they were proof that I was at that point back then, and now I'm another point. Like
it's a cool way to show the progress that you've gone through as a musician. Like it shows where you started and what you've learned, and then how you've progressed with that. I actually kind of like also leaving it on there because what I'm going to be doing at some point for the show is I'm going to be redoing a bunch of episodes for specific reason I'm gonna turn it into a series, but they're all episodes that I did a long time ago. Because actually, I was looking at your channel, by the way, dude. We started our kind of respective like online personas around the same time. My podcast started in June of 2024, and your first upload was June of 2014, and yours was July of 2014.
July.
Actually,
Jesus
mine
Christ,
might have
like
been
10
July.
years.
Yeah, it's been 10 years. I think it's kind of fun, and it's coming up on the 10-year anniversary of my podcast. At the time we're recording this, and probably after this episode comes out, I still don't know what I'm going to do for that, but it's the 10-year anniversary of my show, and it's just funny because I was looking at your channel like, oh my God, we really started around the same time, and just now we're finally connected.
Yeah, that's very curious, but yeah, it's fun. That's a fun coincidence. I like it.
What are some of your favorite covers that you have done, and what are ones that, I know this might sound weird, but like what's one that you released that you would like to do, like you wish you could have another pass at, and what's one that you're like really proud of currently?
Oh, there are a lot I would do again. I'm probably, to follow on your thought about remaking some stuff, I probably will start remaking like the oldest ones, just because I would do them in a very, very different way now.
Okay.
And so, everything from back then when I did like the Big Blue stuff, the Dragon Roost Island. Let me open my Spotify, because it's like I have a lot of... I open YouTube, which is better, I think. But I'm pretty proud of my latest ones, because I do put a lot of effort into them, like more effort than I used to.
Your video production is great, by the way.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. The video production aspect was also very frustrating for me to figure out.
I believe it.
Maybe we'll talk about it later. But I want to say, I might be too much, but anything under a certain threshold, like a certain year, then I don't like anymore. But
I feel you on that. Like, not with your show, but like for myself, like anything I want to say like pre 2019, I'm like, I could have done better on a lot of those.
Yeah. I also am like that I think 2019 or something down the line. But the oldest one I'm very proud about still is my Stick Brush Symphony.
Oh, okay. From Donkey Kong.
The Brawl version, though, not the Donkey Kong. Because the Donkey Kong one I did like as one of my first, and I did this one like 5 years ago, and I'm still pretty proud of it. And among the latest ones, I really like my Technopathetic from Jet Set Radio Future cover, because it was a very, very weird cover to do, because it's super sample based, which I'm not great at. I'm new to that kind of processing and mindset to making music. So it was very, very trial and error. But I think it's it stands out from my other covers, and I think the result is very, very cool. And but basically, the reason why I take like a month to release one cover is because I do put a lot of effort and time into the arrangement. So this at least allows me to be pretty satisfied with the result, with basically everything I put out nowadays. So that's a good thing. Even in terms of psychological,
mental health.
Health. It's like, I did something that I'm proud of. So
I getcha. Do you ever feel like when you, as a creative, do you ever feel like when maybe like the month-long release schedule work, or like a month, one release a month, it works. But do you ever feel like you can't appreciate all the spoils of your work, as it were, because you like once you release something, you're like, all right, I got to move on to the next thing. I got
Oh yeah.
And because the stuff you do, it takes a long time. Like just to like even take away the composition, like take away the amount of time you spend working on the composition just for that. Just the video production alone, with all the different camera angles that you use and how often you have to like switch and cut things over, like I would assume you have to, like, depending on how many instruments you use, you almost have to film it. Like if you have 4 instruments, I'm assuming you're filming it at least 4 different times all the way through.
Yeah, it's like you have to. Of course, I don't have like 4 cameras to do the actual multicam. So it's like every camera angle is me recording another take for it. And I, like, returning to your question from before, is like I do struggle sometimes with I have to put guitar in it, even though I wouldn't really put it. And I struggled for a long time with it. I'm kind of letting it go now. Like sometimes I do like make parts without guitar, and it's all right. I will just have to kind of, get a little better at piano. Now I'm starting to film piano too. So, but sometimes like I cannot play what's being played. Like, and the next cover will be like a big example of that, because there are things that I cannot play, and not even from a technical standpoint. It's just because it's composition. It's not guitar or keys or anything.
Yeah.
So what do I show on video? Like what do I do? So that's the problem I had with video production, that I didn't have before, because I used to just put the games on screen and call it a day like that. But at one point I didn't like it anymore. So the result is better now, but it takes more time. Again, it takes more time, and it takes more time to figure out something to fill these parts without a guitar. So yeah, the more the better you wanna be your final your final product to be, the more time you're gonna be messing around than trying to find the right way to do it.
Yeah, I can only imagine. That's actually one of the reasons I've never gone into video production for my own podcast. Like, I know people like that if I want to get more viewers or more listeners, as it were, on it, like video production's a great way to do it and throw it up on YouTube. But
yeah,
oh man, I don't have like the time for it. Also, like, there's a lot of episodes. I mean, a little stuff that's not going to make it into the final cut of this episode. The intro that I recorded for this, that you all heard about me introducing Carmine here, I flubbed that like easily for the first like 2 minutes. None of that's going to make it in. So if I were to do a video version of it, there's going to be some jump cuts, and I feel I don't like having jump cuts on like a video podcast, because unless I had like multiple cameras and you could like quick do a cut. So like you cut to a second camera, and then that way, I mean, that might be the way I do it though. Maybe if I ever do video production and I have like the video from Zoom or from Discord or whatever, I could then, like, if there's a jump cut, I would literally just jump to them reacting to what I'm saying next or something along those lines. I could mask those transitions a little bit. But even then though, I don't have the time to do it. Like I trying to find time alone for playing games and doing all that other stuff. Anyway, I don't need to. I had the 2023. I did a retrospective for the end of 2023 just a few weeks ago. That was my time to vent about all this bullshit. I'm going to keep I'm going to keep it.
Perfect.
I'm going to keep it directed towards you for the time being. So let me ask you about game soundtracks now. We've been kind of talking a lot about your influences, but what are just some of your favorite game soundtracks? What are some soundtracks that just really have resonated with you that you still find yourself going back to and enjoying to listen?
All right, so there's a whole bunch, but I already mentioned like Metroid Prime, but I wanna say, top of my head, I still listen to it to this day, is the Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Okay.
or Cross or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the only one we don't have on the Switch as of now. It really hit me like hard. I don't know why. I think it's because the composer actually like managed to keep the soundtrack listenable. Like you can listen to it like a song, like it's a series of songs. It's like an album. It's not like something that you would need the game for it to work. It just works by itself as a piece of music. So that's what I really like about it.
I gotcha.
And it's also like a mix of orchestral and electronic instruments, and it's a lot of little things that I think it's more than the sum of its parts.
I gotcha.
That's how I would describe it. Other than that, I would say the Mario Kart 8 soundtrack is fantastic.
Really good.
I don't want, I don't like to say like this is best, like this is the best, or this is better than another thing. But I think Nintendo really did an amazing job with the Mario Kart 8 soundtrack, and still listen to it to this day. I actually, I brought one of the pieces from Mario Kart 8 to my composition teacher one time. And we actually like analyzed it a little bit, and it was cool because he was one of he's my favorite teacher that I had, because he was among the very few in the school that actually was open to everything. That was a very, very major influence in how I do approach music and how I do think about music. So it was pretty cool.
What did he think about it?
He thought it was very cool. I don't remember the track name, but I think it was Shy Guy. No, there's like a track in where you go like into something with woods. Like in a forest thing, and there's like a oboe and flutes and clarinets, all that very, very cool harmony. But yeah, I think Nintendo, like with the Wii U generation, they nailed music. I think they totally nailed it. Like
it might have been called Wild Woods.
Wild Woods, yes.
I was just kind of searching for it. Sorry, you were saying, but with the Wii U generation, what were you talking about with that?
I think Nintendo really nailed the music aspect with the Wii U gen. Like, that generation was what it was, but with music, they found their identity, I think. With a lot of things.
The Wii U, I feel like, it's always going to be one of those chronically underrated systems for a while, just because the bad naming scheme and just a bunch of other things. It was, I miss that era, the 3DS and Wii U, just because even though it was like only a decade ago, 3DS and Wii U just shut down like a year ago, like there's online shops. But I miss it because I miss having like, what is it, like menu themes and like
that's a big one.
There's character to you ever heard of the music label Game Chops?
Yeah, I do have them in mind, that I know who they are. Yes.
Yeah. So they did it was years ago, the founder of it, DJ Cutman, it was right after the Wii U came out. He did a full remix album of just the Wii menu music, the Wii U, excuse me, the Wii U menu music. I think it's called like Wii U Grooves or something like that. It's really good. It's a really good remix album of all that stuff. I love Game Chops is awesome. They're actually local to near where I'm at too, which is kind of
that's
crazy.
Cool.
Yeah, like I live in the Philadelphia area, and they're from Philly, so it's kind of cool that they're like kind of right near me. Anyway,
well, that's an idea for when you decide to do a in-person podcast with video and everything.
I mean, I would need a studio. I would need to actually I wish I had the money and the time to devote to it. If I had the money, in all honesty, what I would probably do is, whether it was in a studio or not, I'd probably hire a video editor, but I don't have the money for that. Like, it's just, I don't have the I don't have the money for someone to take care of that, because I do all of my own editing, scheduling, like everything is produced solo.
On
so
you,
is on me. So there's no way there's no way I have time for the video part. So I think that's all I had in terms of specific to the YouTube channel. But is there anything about your YouTube channel that you would like about music in general? It doesn't even have to be specific to your channel, that you just wish more people would ask about or know about? Like, I always feel like, I'm not a musician, so I'm coming at it from a very specific perspective. But maybe from your perspective, what's something that like you wish more people knew about in terms of music composition and arrangements?
It's a broad question.
It is.
I would say I wish more people, just the way they think about music wasn't so dismissive. When I use this word, I'm not sure if it's the best word to use, but we kind of have this thing where we think about music like it's something that it's there. It's you give it for granted, and it's really not. Like, sometimes, especially like in projects like games or movies or anything like that, it can make or break something, and you don't like the average person doesn't really think too hard about that. Mm-hmm. And I would really like people to kind of understand how much work there's, under or behind a piece of music, and don't take it for granted. Don't take it for granted that you can go on Spotify and have everything at your fingertips to listen to, because it's months of work from musicians. And I don't want to get into discussion about streaming royalties and
I know
payments from Spotify.
I believe it. From everything that I've heard from other music artists, like it's like it's a love-hate relationship with Spotify, because you don't get the money you deserve, but you get the notoriety. Like, you get a lot more reach,
or at
than
least
you would.
you get the chance at it. Like, you get the shot at, maybe someone will put me in a big playlist, and maybe I'll get followers and streams.
That's gotta be such a tough thing to balance. I can't, like, I don't envy that. I mean, there's always, unfortunately, with everything, there's always nasty sides to the business of it, with whether it's music, and now also with all the advent of AI garbage, all the AI music, illustrations. I use the term illustrations in quotations, or illustrations. I can't. I'm not going to get on my pedestal. I have a very strong opinion about AI art.
You're not the only one.
Oh, I believe, especially for people who spent years of their life practicing something. Anyway. And that kind of actually ties into something we were talking about off mic. Just maybe, I don't know if this is not to answer for you, but besides what you were mentioning, how like you wish people realize how important music was and not to take it for granted, which I agree with you. Music, like 9 times out of 10, like the soundtrack dictates the emotion the audience is feeling in a movie, and even like outside of it, if it's just music that's not tied with some other form of media, people listen to music for whatever mood they are currently in. But what is it? Just talking about the gatekeeping with different genres of music.
Yes,
like that's something you were talking a lot about it to me off mic about it. Just like that can't be this, that's not jazz because it doesn't adhere to this and this standard. And I mean, I don't know enough about it, but I'm fascinated by that. Do you want to elaborate at all? Like we don't have to talk about just games. This is what I like about this. It's an informal interview. We just kind of shoot the shit and see where it goes.
And that's very, very cool aspect of podcasts.
I love it.
But yeah, to kind of get back to the discussion, it was like I would say everything started with how music is taught in music school and colleges. And I had 2 degrees. I have one in jazz guitar and one in jazz composition.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they approached like music teaching, at least where I went, but it's I think it's very common, is a very conservative kind of way. So this genre, which in my case is jazz, should be played like this. So if you play it this way, like this specific way, you are a good student and a good musician. If you don't, then you are not. And this shapes years of your life as a student, because it's like you spend like 5 years or more, like in my case, because I have 2 degrees, and like where everything about your self-worth as a musician gravitates around your grades and how teachers interact with you and everything about that. So I think it has a lot to do with how I perceive music now, because I now don't want any borders, and I don't want to even say if something is good or not, because one thing that I started to dislike is music or art discussion in general, where it ends up with things like X thing is good, Y thing is bad. I don't really like this way of approaching art. It's like it might not be for you, or might not be what the artist intended, and we get in more abstract territory here. But my own interpretation of how I see art and everything is like even errors are up to question. Like
an
it's
error,
like
if something doesn't sound human, if it's too perfect, it doesn't sound human almost. And sometimes an error, like what is it? You see it with like vocal coaches. They do like the vocal coach react stuff on like YouTube and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
Well, they'll react to something and they'll say like that technically, they'll say like, oh, technically they didn't hit that note right, but it sounds better that they didn't, because it adds this level of emotion to it that you would have not heard otherwise.
Like
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's more like like I think you can consider like an error something that the musician or the artist didn't intend to do. But if I'm playing a weird note that sounds weird to you, maybe it doesn't to me, maybe it does to me. But if I want to play that note, like who says that's an error that should be done? Like, right?
Exactly.
So if I didn't want to do it, then I want to do something else, right? But if I'm perfectly conscious that I want to hit that note and that weird dissonant whatever note, then good for me. I want to do that. I did it.
Yeah.
I think this actually liberated me a lot. Like once I hit this level of consciousness about music and how I like to think about it, it liberated from all the things that all of the baggage from music school. And of course I'm super thankful to music school, because I know all my things because of that. But like it's just the way they approach it that I don't like.
And like we were saying off mic, you have to learn what the shape of the box is so you can learn how to color outside of it, type of thing, or draw outside of the box, type of thing. But when the school that you're going to doesn't allow that freedom to like, hey, what the box is already, and it doesn't allow you to kind of like step outside of it, I could see how that would be super frustrating when it's like, I know this stuff. I know what
Yeah.
I'm doing. Just let me experiment, type of thing.
Yeah, it's a complex discourse, I think, because like from one point of view, I understand part of it because it's like you are a jazz school and you have to put out jazz musicians, right?
Mhm.
Right. So, if you let a student graduate that doesn't know how to play at least, how do I put this? There are certain things
Like a
in
standard,
music.
like they don't know how to play a
Yeah,
certain standard.
there are ways to that define the ways to play that define genres. So with jazz, it's a little bit difficult because you have like a whole century to to pick from.
Yeah.
So if you're playing big band music, then you're gonna be around the 30s. If you play bebop, it's gonna be the 40s, and then everything else after that, Miles Davis, and I don't want to get again too technical, but you have more than a century to pick from. It's like I am a jazz musician, yeah, but what do I play? And in my music school, it was you had to play bebop, like so very fast tempos and improvisation, and very little time dedicated to arrangements and stuff like that. It's more like quartet, quintet things, or trios, small formations. And then that's why also that's the reason why I went and studied composition later, because I realized I liked the composition aspect more than the performing aspect. But
I gotcha.
Yeah, it's a complex discourse again, because it's like the jazz school has to put out jazz musicians, the classical school has to put out classical musicians. But also, I'm not a product. I am a person that wants to express themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's more important to have everything clear, like in terms of knowledge. And then I can just use whatever I want to create whatever I want, instead of creating something that's already there and just adhere to some standards, if that makes any sense. But that's the way I do approach music. So that's also why I do make a lot of different genres with my covers, just because I feel like I don't want to limit myself to just one or few genres, right?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. That makes sense. All right. Well, we are starting to run out of time on this episode, so I have a few more questions for you to wrap up before we do our final shout outs and whatnot. So first, I'm going to, as I do with all my interviews now, I am a huge fan of the Alan Alda podcast, Clear and Vivid, which is all about communication and whatnot, and he always asks his guests a handful of questions to end the episodes. I'm not going to ask all of his questions. There's like 7 of them, and we don't have time for all that, but
okay.
I'm going to pick one of them, and I usually alternate between 2 just because I like these 2 the most. The others are a little bit too, you know what? No, screw it. So his questions all revolve around communication. So the normal ones that I ask are like, what book changed your life, or what's the other one? It's like, what do you wish you really understood? Those are both really good questions. But since his is about communication, this has nothing to do with games. This doesn't really have anything to do with anything we've talked about. But I like this question. I keep iterating or repeating that it's all about how we communicate, right? Or that's his podcast. So one of the major parts of communication kind of revolves around this question. How do you tell someone that they got their facts wrong? How do you tell someone that they're wrong about something? What do you do when you have to relay that information to them?
Oh, that's a very specific question.
Yeah, right. I know
that's a good one.
His questions are great. I like
Yeah.
that question a lot, and haven't used it once during the show. So you're the first one to get this one.
Oh man, I'm exclusive for now. But all right. So it depends. All right. So if we're talking about art and music, I try to be as flexible as possible. Like I already talked about how I do do not like absolutes with art because I don't think art is, is the best subject to deal with this kind of thinking. When it's about, science or scientific stuff that I know my facts on, I try to be as direct as possible. I don't like to taint the message too much. I know some people like to, make the other person feel reassured, and then, it's all right if you, if you got this thing wrong and everything else. But I do value the direct approach instead, just because, the thing is wrong and you should know about it so that your next actions or, whatever you're going to do next is going to be with that knowledge. Like, so even, it's this approach is not the best with, people who get really sensitive about these kind of things.
Yep.
There's a weird thing where, your opinions, if I don't agree with your opinion, I kind of, it's something, it's like an attack towards you. And I don't understand that way of thinking. I understand that there's a lot of people who do that on different levels, but my way of approaching these kind of things led to disagreements that were a little harsh sometimes. But again, I do value the how clear the information is.
The direct approach is a lot less. It doesn't beat around the bush, as it were. I can relate to that. I as myself, I'm actually a pretty sensitive person, but I've learned to kind of I don't have the thickest skin as I should, but the way I kind of handle it because I'm a supervisor at my job is like, it's to beat. I am direct, but what I say, I'll tell them like, this is the severity of the mess up. Like if it's small, then I tell them it's a small thing, but make sure you change it because these do compound. I tell them if you continue this, then it's a bigger issue. But if it's a one-time thing, okay, no big deal. If it's a big thing, I flat out tell them like, this is a big issue. We need to see this fixed. Like, and sometimes it's even clear, this is no indictment on you as a person. It's just, this is a mistake. Yeah. Mistakes happen.
Exactly. So it's not like an aggression. That's sometimes the misunderstanding is, I'm not attacking you. Right.
Mm-hmm. And it depends on how you relay that. Like, so if we have a disagreement on an opinion, right, and you say, I'm not sure if I agree with that, I think this, and this. If I took that personally, that's more on me. Now, if I state my opinion and someone goes, that's stupid, then I'm like, that feels more like an attack as opposed to just a difference of opinion. Like, you can still think that opinion is stupid, but the way you relay it, you can just say, oh, no, I disagree with this, and this. And if they push the button, that's a different story. Then they're being aggressive over it. But all right. So we got to move on to our final question. This last question is questions from Courtney. Is a section of the show. Courtney is my wife. She famously, to my listeners, knows nothing about my guests, nothing about gaming and nerd culture, anime, whatever, what have you. She doesn't know any of that. So I always ask her for questions to ask my guest. So here she offered two, and one I already kind of know the answer to. It was coffee or tea. You were drinking coffee.
I'm super big on coffee.
But here's the one I want to ask, though. I think it's a little bit more interesting. If you could go away for a week's vacation in a book, which book would it be?
Oh man, that's a
good one.
Difficult one. That's a good one.
Man, where would I go?
All right, so like I have a lot of astronomy books because it's something I really, really like. Mm-hmm. But does it, doesn't really work.
You could go on a vacation in the stars. Let's just assume it's magic. At that point, you can breathe in space. Sure.
Then I'd definitely go see some at least the planets from our system. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. Gonna say the common thing and say the Shire from Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Where would mine be?
Sounds like a pretty chill place to be.
Well, I mean, there is that one point in Lord of the Rings where it gets burned, like burned to the ground.
Yeah, in the book, yes. Before that.
For me, the first thing in my mind was Narnia, but that's just because it was like brought up in conversation over the last week. I don't know where mine would be, in all honesty, but yeah. So that's it. That's all the questions I got for you, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for
to wrap this all up. Where can the good people find you online? And of course, is there anything you'd like to promote at the day this episode comes out, so you know what is and what's not coming out? It'll be out on the 24th on Patreon, but everyone on the free feed is going to be getting it on the 28th. So the January 28th is when this is coming out.
All right, so everyone can find me at Game and Sound on YouTube and Spotify and everything. Every streaming service. So you just write down Game and Sound either with the commercial E or just and spelled. Mm-hmm. And you can find me on also pretty much any social. I don't use Facebook anymore.
Don't blame me.
You're gonna find me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm also on Threads because it became available here in Europe, like I think in last month or something. Mm-hmm. I don't use it much, but you can find me there too. And in terms of promotion, I will be releasing now it's in the future, but it's going to be in the past for the listeners, a new cover on the 26th of January. And it's going to be a cover of Driftvale City from Pokemon Black and White. It's going to be very, very interesting in terms of genre. There are at least 3 different genres in there.
Oh wow! Okay.
So yeah, it's a pretty good one to start the year, and it's gonna have also a little message about everything we talked about today, about the genres and gatekeeping, and every music is valid and should exist, right?
I like it. So yes, everyone go check out Carmine's channel, Game and Sound. It's fantastic. For those who listened to my Secret of Monkey Island episode, the song that I had as the outro for it was his arrangement of that theme. So go check it out. As for myself, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, at Still Loading Pod over there. Also Twitch at Still Loading Pod. I stream usually Saturdays and Tuesdays, assuming I don't have a podcast recording session, but I stream over there on those days. You can also support the show in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whichever podcasting app you use, because it helps more people find the show and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. And I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show by going over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For $1 a month, you'll get all the episodes earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which this year there's been a lot of extra voting going on. I do quarterly polls every 3 months, but I started it this year. There is backlog month, where at the beginning of January, the poll has since ended, but at the beginning of January I put 16 games up and people could vote for as many as they wanted, and the top 4 are going to be covered by me on the podcast, either in November or October, depending on what the show's schedule kind of lines up to be. But that will dictate my block of games for that month. So Patreon, like, that's all at the $1 level. You get all those the voting rights, the early access, things, and also patron there's a patron exclusive level on my Discord, but that's a little bit more. I always forget to shout that out. That's at the $1 level. For $4, you'll get everything at the $1 level, plus 2 mini episodes every month, which run about 15 to 20 minutes each. They're all a variety of different topics. They're mini reviews for games I'm playing. They are Like sometimes I do music episodes where I pick a selection of different music, like SNES selections or Genesis jams, and I just kind of pick different music from those different systems. And that's all at the $4 level. At the $5 level, you'll get everything I mentioned prior, plus access to Still Bonding, which is my monthly James Bond podcast where me and a bunch of friends bond over 007. The time this episode comes out, GoldenEye will be the most recent episode, and Tomorrow Never Dies will be next month. So, yeah, that's everything over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. So if you like all my stuff, you want to help support me and continue to help me grow the show, I'd be super appreciative of it. And yeah, so I think that's all I think that's it. Yeah, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. That's all I got for you today, listeners. Thank you all so much for joining me. Carmine, thank you once again for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome, and I hope to have you on again. We can talk about a game or something. But yeah, that's it. That's all the time I got. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you all next time.
You still listening, gentlemen? That last few minutes might have been a little confusing. Now, don't tell me you're taking all this seriously.
And remember that all sound is vibration.